All other senior army officers present that
It is about 33 years ago when I first wore the proud uniform of the Nigerian Army as a recruit. And today, by the grace of the Almighty, I pull it off for the last time as a fulfilled 3-star general and 1-time Chief of Army Staff. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Long live the Nigerian Army. Thank you and God bless.
Now, do you have any regret for the role you played as a, it's like, just hold on. It's like in the history of this country, you are the first chief of army staff who will leave office and then go to prison and stand with charges of murder, conspiracy to murder, and all sorts of heinous crimes.
Yes, we arranged things.
Just hold on, General. So, do you regret your role or circumstances that brought you to this level? Because it's not a noble thing.
I have no regrets. I did my job as a chief of army staff. I turned the Nigerian army around. Some people are disgruntled. They wrote all sorts of things, and they wrote me, but there is no problem at all. I feel very proud of what I've done in the Nigerian army.
Nigeria experienced its first coup d'etat on 15th January 1966, when some young majors, mostly of Igbo extraction, from the then eastern region, led by Major Nzegu Kaduna Chukwuma, overthrew the government of Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. As it turned out, whether deliberately or by accident, most of the leading politicians and senior military officers killed by the coup plotters were from the then northern and western regions. The majors who masterminded the overthrow of the elected government were believed to have deliberately spared politicians and senior military officers of the eastern region. The loop-sided nature of the killings gave credibility to those who believed that the coup was motivated by sectional interests, and this had consequences that would forever haunt Nigeria. Unfortunately, whether it is right or otherwise, the emergence of General Ironsi as the head of state, an Igbo from the then eastern region, in the aftermath of the events of 15 January 1966, gave further credence to the suspicion that the Igbo wanted to take over the leadership of the country. Suspicion and tension were further heightened by the failure of General Ironsi to take steps to deal with the culprits.
My main concern is to restore law and order as soon as possible.
As a result, some military officers, mostly from the northern region, staged the counter-coup on 29 July 1966, killing General Ironsi and his host, Colonel Fajri, the then military governor of Western Region. This eventually led to the killing of many Nigerians, mostly of Igbo extraction in the northern parts of the country. The chains of reactions to these events eventually led to the Nigerian Civil War from 6 July 1967 to 15 July 1970. After the Civil War, it appeared that the phenomenon of coup d'etat had ended until 1975, when General Gowon was overthrown for what was believed to be a response to his failure to honor his earlier pledge to return Nigeria to civil rule in 1974. As a result of the overthrow of General Gowon, there were coups, counter-coups, and attempted coups between 1967 and 1997. Some of the coups succeeded, while others failed, with loss of lives either in the cause of executing coup or in the cause of executing the officers convicted during the various court-martials. Also, many innocent military officers were executed as a result of politics in the military, led by the greedy and over-ambitious officers. These coups and counter-coups have had far-reaching consequences for the military, including fostering ethnic and regional suspicion for the country's most nationalistic organization and eroding discipline and esprit de corps, which constitute the hallmark of the military profession. What, however, should be worrying is the harvest of coups, including attempted ones, within a short period of 8 years, during which Nigeria witnessed a cycle of coups, starting with the coup led by Major Gideon Oka in April 1990. It would seem that coup-making acquired a life of its own and was turned into an industry fueled by greed, power, and inordinate ambition of officers. I will give account of each of these coups and attempted coups, and in the course of so doing, I will puncture the myth and propaganda of some of the leading actors who have misled Nigerians into believing that coup allegation is mere figment of imagination. In their desperate efforts to deceive Nigerians about the truth, they dismissed the weighty allegation by referring to them as phantom coups. Nothing can be further from the truth. Much has been said by many people with respect to the Oka-led coup. I think it took everyone by surprise, and one would have thought the security officers from the National Security Advisor, NSA, to the Armed Services, Security Chiefs, DMI, Naval and Air Intelligence would have been brought to book for failure to uncover the plot. One would also have expected that the state security services, with its vast networks that cover the 774 local government councils, would have picked up early signals. Yet, from available evidence, the coupists trained right by the roadside in Ikorodu without anyone reporting it. Even on the day of the coup, the coupists boarded vehicles from there and nothing was reported. The acting DMI was said to have been informed of the coup by one of the coupists, but he failed to act. It remains an absurdity that some individual officers with clear responsibilities were not punished or brought to book for the serious security lapse that prevented nipping in the bud the plans of Major Gideon Oka and his accomplices. On the day of the coup, I was Commander 9 Mechanized Brigade and was also the cantonment commander of Ikeja Cantonment. Ikeja was then occupied by many units, including HQ 9 Mechanized Brigade, 123 Guards Brigade under Lieutenant Colonel Ochedo, 242 Recce Battalion under Lieutenant Colonel Zachary, 201 Corp Recce Company under Major Abdul, a regiment of artillery, and some units from Army Headquarters. The most difficult aspect of being a cantonment commander was that none of these fighting units was under the command of the 9 Mechanized Brigade. All units under the 9 Mechanized Brigades were outside the cantonment except one battalion in Lagos located at Ojo Cantonment. It became necessary for me to develop a good relationship with the commanders of these units and their officers. I was able to accomplish this because of sports, personal visits to officers, and assisting them anytime they were in need. This paid off on the day of the coup. On that fateful day, I was out of the cantonment to visit senior officers in Ikoyi. Normally, I visited many officers anytime I went to Ikoyi, but on the Saturday before the coup, I decided to go to bed early at about 10 p.m. I usually went to bed between 2 and 3 a.m. My wife thought I was not feeling well and came to ask me what was wrong. I told her I just felt like going to bed. Early on Sunday morning, the guard woke me up at 2 o'clock by pressing the special security bell which had never been used before. I knew there was a problem. I got up and dressed in my sportswear, took my weapon and rushed out of the house, only to hear gunshots in the cantonment's main entrance. I drove to the gates and got out of the car. One soldier shouted at me to take cover because they were under attack. I hesitated. The two soldiers rushed at me and pushed me down. While I was on the ground, they told me that one captain and sergeant at the gates were already dead. When I got up, I saw their bodies. I told the soldiers to guard and defend the gates while I drove back to the cantonment. My official quarters, known as Tiger House, was located by the road. I could not go back there because the coupists had entered the cantonment through a gate located at Fajui Road, which had 2 guest houses for visiting officers. Tiger House was surrounded and firing was going on. Gunsmoke covered the house. I drove past and parked near CO 242 Recce Battalion's house. I got out and CO 242 Recce Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Zachary, my provost officer, Captain Akagege, and Lieutenant Nabasa, an officer from the Recce unit located in Ikeja, were with me. Meanwhile, some of the coupists who were officers from the armor units in the cantonment had taken over Recce vehicles and were driving around the cantonment. Captain Umpere was using one of the vehicles to fire into my residence, thinking I was there. Later, during his court-martial, he told me he had been directed to pin me down. Then he looked at me and said, "I thought I had pinned you down. Sir, you are lucky and brave soldier. I am sorry." When the unit commanders came to me, I directed CO 242 Recce Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Zachary, and Major Abdul, OC of 201 Recce Company, to proceed to their units to take charge. I moved with Captain Akagege and Lieutenant Nabasa on foot to see what was happening. Instead of going to his unit, CO 242 Recce Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Zachary, decided to escape and got his orderly to help him push him over the cantonment fence to Onigbogbo. Unfortunately, OC 201 Recce unit, Major Abdul, went straight to his unit as I instructed him to. Some of the coupists saw him and told him he was irrelevant and therefore would not be touched. He willingly gave them the keys to the tanks because he knew that no fuel that went beyond the cantonment gate would be put in any armored vehicle. Meanwhile, Akagege, Nabasa and I moved around the cantonment. These two officers followed me until a volley of bullets started coming from the direction in which we were moving. When I dashed down for cover, they believed I had been shot and killed and decided to escape by climbing the cantonment wall towards Onigbongbo. I had my weapon with me and sat in front of Major Kaka's house. When some of the coupists passed by me, I noticed they were firing into the air and appeared to be under the influence of drugs. That explained why there were not many casualties in the cantonment. After this, around 3 o'clock in the morning, I drove my car to my office. After a while, the Chief of Army Staff, General Abacha, called me on the phone and asked me what was going on in the cantonment. I told him there was a lot of firing going on, but there was no cause for alarm because the cantonment was safe. He handed the phone to President Babangida and I paid my compliments to the President. From my office, I abandoned my car and walked to headquarters 123 Guards Battalion, which, according to the cantonment's standing operational procedures, was to be the rally point in case of any emergency. As soon as I approached the unit, Major Hassan Biu drew his pistol and shouted at me. I shouted back at him, and when he heard my voice, he dropped his pistol. He played a very important role in foiling the 1990 coup. I went to the commanding officer's office, where it appeared everyone was confused. I asked the commanding officer what his plan was, and he told me he had soldiers on the parade ground that he intended to move into the cantonment to deal with the coupists. I suggested that because no one knew what was happening, his soldiers could end up opening fire on each other or on innocent soldiers. He agreed and directed his soldiers to stay on the parade ground. The CO had already deployed rocket-propelled grenades to blow up any tank that moved towards the cantonment gates. I assured him no armored vehicle would get out of the cantonment, which gave him confidence. Between 5:30 and 6 a.m., firing stopped inside the cantonment and all recce vehicles ran out of fuel. None reached the cantonment gates. As soon as it was daybreak, some of the coupists who were drunk or under the influence of drunks hung their weapons and were arrested inside the cantonment. In Lagos, we had two brigades, the 9th Brigade and the Brigade of Guards. The Brigade of Guards was under the command of Colonel J.M. Inenge, who was on pass out of Lagos. We had a confident commanding officer in charge of the 26th Guards Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Gandhi Zidon. We had no problem foiling the coup in Lagos, and by 6:30 a.m., we had started planning the counter-attack from Ikeja, while Lieutenant Colonel Zidon and other officers were planning it in Ikoyi. I cherished the moment they brought tanks to go to Ojo Cantonment when it was under the coupist control, after they had arrested most of the senior officers and locked them up. As soon as the tanks were refueled, every officer wanted to be involved in the counter-coup. We sent some officers led by Major Hassan Biu to support Lieutenant Colonel Zidon, while other officers left Ikeja Cantonment for Ojo Cantonment, including 2nd Lieutenant Nabasa, who had come back into the cantonment after his initial escape. These officers successfully took over Radio Nigeria from the coupists, who were making a broadcast. Officers who went to Ojo Cantonment were able to release the officers who were locked up, but all the coupists who operated there escaped. Lieutenant Colonel Zachary, who ran away from his unit, came back later in the day. One of his officers, the captain, swore to shoot him for disgracing them by abandoning them when other commanders had stayed and led. It took the pleading of many officers to persuade him not to shoot his commanding officer. I recommended that Lieutenant Colonel Zachary be court-martialed, but General Abacha had him retired after much pressure from other people. What bothered me the most was my inability to get in touch with my GOC, General Mohammed Gusau. When I went to the office between 2:30 and 3 a.m. on the day of the coup, I was supposed to get in touch with my GOC so he could give me directives. He was nowhere to be found, and I had to act on my own initiative. I later found out that he was in Lagos and had made no effort to reach me, even though telephone lines were open, and never asked me to brief him on anything pertaining to the coup. When Chief of Army Staff General Abacha asked me how things were, I told him my GOC gave me directives. The high sense of responsibility on the part of Lieutenant Colonel Ochedo should be noted. When the coupists came into Ikeja Cantonment, Lieutenant Colonel Ochedo was not inside. By the time he returned and tried to enter the cantonment, the battle for the main gate was being fought. He nevertheless managed to get through the main gate because the soldiers manning it were under his command. We were lucky to have some very good young officers in the cantonment, such as Majors Danladi Kaka, David Bitrus, Hassan Biu, and Fadia. This last major was an education officer who joined me from 4 a.m. until the end of the operation. He was more of a combatant than the officers who refused to show their faces. These young officers were made targets of elimination by the coupists, who had decided to eliminate them first. As God will have it, after spending some time in the mess, the young majors had decided to go to a place in Onugbogbo, and the coupists missed them. As soon as the majors heard firing in the cantonment, they rushed back. They had no problem entering because the soldiers in their unit knew them as officers who had been out. The cantonment was saved by these gallant officers who took charge by marshalling their officers and soldiers. After surviving the aborted coup led by Major Oka, the Babangida's long and expensive transition program came to a tragic end with the annulment of June 12, 1993 presidential election, which many Nigerians correctly or incorrectly believed was won by the late Chief MKO Abiola. The events that followed the annulment, including the formation of NADECO to fight for the restoration of Abiola's mandate and legitimacy crisis of the interim national government contrived by General Babangida, who was forced to step aside, confirms the simple logic that one coup begets another. The first was the Abacha coup, which will still be discussed later. The Abacha's coup sacked the ING, a move which appeared to have benefited from the ruling of a federal high court in Lagos, which declared the ING illegal, although it would seem that the court ruling merely provided an alibi at the right moment. It will forever remain a puzzle to many Nigerians that two former military helmsmen, a former head of state and his deputy, were arrested and tried for the coup that sought to remove General Sani Abacha from power in 1995. Interestingly, the 1995 coup, which either out of ignorance or for political reasons has been termed phantom by the actual players, highlights the challenge of lack of honor and integrity among highly placed officers because of naked pursuit of power. Despite spirited denial by key officers, some of them will always tell the truth, including Colonel Lawal Gwadabe and Colonel Bello Fadile, whose recordings cannot be denied. I want to state clearly and without fear of contradiction that the 1995 coup in which General Obasanjo was convicted was real. I am glad that General Mujakberu, who investigated the coup, stood his ground in asserting that it really happened. General P.N. Aziza carried out his duties by trying and convicting General Obasanjo and has clearly stated that if he retried the case, he would still convict Obasanjo. I know the coup was real and was reported to General A.Z. Kazir when he was GOC 1 Mechanized Div, but he did nothing about it until he was appointed Chief of Army Staff. I remember going to General Kazir when I was commander of the Lagos garrison and telling him there were rumors about the coup. He confirmed that he had heard about it. I asked him what he was going to do about it, and he said he was handling it. He was my boss, so I did not go further. I don't remember the exact date, but on Sunday, the Chief of Army Staff, Major General Kazir, invited us into his study at his residence. Present at the meeting were Generals Kazir, Olarenwaju, who happened to be in Lagos from Jos, Mukhtar, the DMI, and Adeleke Kola, the Provost Marshal, and myself, Commander, Lagos Garrison Command. General Olarenwaju briefed us on how the coup plan started from his division and said that he had lots of officers involved. In Lagos, we had two involved officers named Colonel Fadile and Colonel Gabriel Ajayi, my Colonel Administration and Quartering. The decision to arrest these officers was made at this meeting. Based on General Olarenwaju's briefing, it was clear that the officers could strike anytime. It was also decided that General Olarenwaju should be given an aircraft to take him to Jos. The same aircraft would then proceed to Yola to bring in Colonel Gwadabe, who came to Jos and was put in detention. Headquarters Lagos Garrison Command has always been the venue of coup trials in Lagos and was used as such in 1995. After the trial and conviction of Generals Obasanjo and Yaradua, efforts were made by many Nigerians, including some army officers, to get them released. At one point, I went with General P.N. Aziza to the head of state, and we pleaded with him to pardon the two generals and release them from prison because they were former head of state and his deputy. He promised to look at it, but I was told later, though I did not confirm it, that some security officials advised him against the release and nothing was done. I did not go to Abacha because I had doubts about General Obasanjo's involvement in the coup based on the briefing we received from the DMI, Colonel Sabo, the SIP report, and the statements of other coupists. Before the Uputa panel in Abuja, Obasanjo's son petitioned against Major Hamza al-Mustafa, and the recorded statements were brought forward as evidence. Hamza al-Mustafa's lawyer, Barrister Naala, made written and oral requests for the tapes to be played. For whatever reasons, the panel refused to give Major Hamza al-Mustafa the opportunity to show them, thereby denying Nigerians the opportunity to know the truth about General Obasanjo's involvement in the 1995 coup. If the Oputa panel had acted differently, Nigerians could have had another General Dia episode. General Obasanjo used his position as president to cover up his involvement in the 1995 coup. I believe that the main players will one day come out to tell Nigerians the truth, and the tape recordings of these statements will one day be played for Nigerians to see and draw their own conclusions. People use the term phantom coup because it was the Abacha period, and Abacha is the only military head of state to spare coup plotters who were arrested, tried, and convicted. If it had occurred during the regime of another military head of state, no one would have talked of a phantom coup.
Now, how many chiefs of army staff served under General Abacha before he died?
Four.
Yes. I am sure that to do away with any of them before the appointment of General Ishaya Bamaiyi, he did not have to call you to embark on any publication in order to get them out of the way.
Yes,
either to remove them.
As I said before, when there were several reports about the activities of General Bamaiyi that was emanating from so many quarters, from overseas and everything,
yes.
General Abacha was apprehensive that he had already changed 3 service chiefs, that he should be managed, the transition was going to come to an end, that it was not going to be good for him to, hence he ordered us to do this so that Bamaiyi could now concentrate on his image than concentrate on the stabilization of the government. That's what I said.
Okay. And it was for the same destabilization of the government that at least the Al-Wali Kazir and MC Ali were removed because they were alleged to be involved in some acts that were considered not loyal to the then regime of General Abacha.
Yes.
Removing him, I mean, General Abacha also had the powers to have removed General Bamaiyi at that time as well.
Of course.
Yes. But he rather chose to get you involved in making publications against him. That is what you want this commission to believe.
Correct.
Yes.
I said that there are other people who also adduce that we were made to write. And I told you that if he was not the one,